This series is all about weekend wellness. Long walks are a great way to clear my mind. But of course, I never forget about the food. So in this series, I'm going to show you some tips and tricks on how to prepare brilliant meals before you go out and some snacks to take with you on your trips. Welcome to my home. This episode is all about homemade snacks to replace those bags of crisps and super sweet chocolate bars. I'm going to make a baked healthy Char Siu Bao, some seaweed biscuits, and a dark chocolate bark filled with dried fruit and pistachios. Can't wait. So your Char Siu Bao dough starts usually with a strong white bread flour. But I've replaced that white bread flour with a whole wheat white flour. The difference between whole wheat flour and normal plain flour is that it's less refined, or it's pretty much unrefined. It's just sort of ground from the actual whole grain, keeping all that fibre and making sure that it's rich in vitamins. The rest, pretty simple. I've swapped out butter or margarine for avocado oil, really healthy oil, unsaturated fat. And then my last swap is your white sugar, which I've swapped out for coconut palm sugar, the granulated version. Much healthier, slower releasing energy, lower GI. Let's go for it. This is actually really simple. Dry ingredients, straight in. I've got fast action dry yeast, a little pinch of sea salt, my sugar, and then I've got about 200 mils of warm water here, which I'm going to pour my avocado oil into. Look at that colour. I'm going to gradually add the warm water and oil mix to the bread dough. So you want to start it on a low speed, and then once everything's sort of combined together, whack that up. So we've got this great sort of tacky texture, and you can see from the dough already that it'll be a much darker version of your classic sort of baked Char Siu Bao. Just give it a little knead. All you got to do is sit that back in the bowl in a nice round ball. So it's good to cover it with a little bit of oil, and then cover that with a damp cloth. So you want to pop that in a warm place for about 1 to 1.5 hours. Now, my char siu, which we actually have a video of how to make already, is nice and healthy as well. But the real natural sweetness of this barbecue pork has come from a whole pear or Chinese pear. It's also pork fillet as opposed to belly pork or pork shoulder. So it's really lean meat. Now, this marinade that the pork's been cooking in is essentially finely chopped ginger and garlic, some tomato paste, some five spice, white pepper, light and dark soy sauce, a little bit of rice wine and some sesame oil, and then the palm sugar and pear to give it that sweetness. Mix that through, and you can see that marinade is wrapped around really nicely, and the pear almost gives it that moist texture that the fat would otherwise do from different cuts of meat. We're not missing anything. In the fridge, ready for later. So the dough's had about an hour and a half, and you can see how light and airy that is. Just gonna take that out, knock it back, and let it prove again for another half an hour. So whilst the dough's proving, I can go straight onto my biscuits. The seaweed biscuits, packed full of seaweed, so nori, coarsely blitzed up in a food processor. I've swapped out normal plain flour for 2 types of flour. Buckwheat flour, which actually comes from a seed, really high in fibre. Spelt flour, great source of protein and that ancient grain. And then with normal biscuits, you'd use just butter, but I've got 75% of butter, 25% avocado to make that sort of breadcrumby texture of the biscuit. Start making your breadcrumbs by just pressing in to the butter and avocado and getting that flour mixed in well. We've got some grated parmesan, poppy seeds, sesame seeds, and then all that seaweed straight into the mix. And you don't need much salt, but just a pinch of salt helps to bring out the flavour of all of that. Mix that together. You can see how packed full of seaweed this biscuit is. Super healthy, but really tasty. So once that's well mixed together, then you just want to use 3 egg yolks, and you want to combine that as evenly as possible. So what you want to do now, as you can see, I'm just sort of clumping together balls of the mix, just to make it easy enough for me to get as many biscuits out as possible. Now, because of the seaweed, I find it easier to use your hands and just make circles of your dough. So once you've made your biscuits, just place them on a bit of greaseproof. They pretty much stay that shape, so they only need a little bit of space in between each one. I'm going for nice rustic biscuits here. Straight into the oven, 200 degrees C, 12 minutes. I've got time now to make my chocolate bark. The first part of this is you want sort of low sugar, high cocoa content, dark chocolate. 85% this is. I'd go for a minimum of 70% cocoa, dark chocolate. I'm going to melt that straight onto your bain-marie, just boiling water. Just go on a light boil. I've got some cocoa nibs here, which add a nice bit of crunch. I've got a mixture of seeds and berries. So I've got cranberries, goji berries, and some blueberries here. So I've chosen this dried berry mix because although it's got sugar in it, it's much lower in sugar than some of the other dried fruits like prunes or dried mango or dried pineapple. And then my whole pistachio nuts, which are going to add even more crunch. The last bit here, some toasted coconut flakes, which again, could be a snack in themselves. So my chocolate is all nicely melted. Act relatively quickly, but don't panic at this point. Just pour it onto your parchment paper. Just gonna get that as thin as I possibly can. And then just start to scatter everything over the top. Some cocoa nibs, your dried fruit and seed mix. Try and go as evenly as possible. Then your pistachios and your coconut flakes to finish off. Looks beautiful. And with a recipe as simple as this, you know it's going to taste fantastic. Then all you have to do is let that set, and then you've got your bark. So my biscuits have got this beautiful golden brown finish to them. Let those cool and they'll get nice and crunchy. So my bao dough's had another half hour of proving, and you can see again how that's risen nicely, but it got a nice shape to it. So I'm going to start to roll this into a cylinder of dough first, and then take out good sort of handfuls of dough to make my Char Siu Bao. From there, you either just roll it into a nice smooth ball, or the traditional technique is what we call pinchy, pinchy, twisty, twisty. So you push in with one thumb and pinch and twist it back together to get nice smooth rounds of dough. Once you've made balls out of each one. Then you just flatten the ball. You take your chilled cooked pork meat and place that into the center of the dough. And you can either just pull the sides up like so, or the traditional method is just to push and pull like so until you get to the end. And you just then twist that together and really pinch it tight so it closes up nicely. First Char Siu Bao, pretty much done. So they've all been nicely shaped. Cover that, let them rest for another 15 to 20 minutes before we egg wash them. So that's had 15-20 minutes. My oven's on 180 degrees C. Brush each bao with a bit of egg wash and then straight into the oven. Another 15 to 20 minutes and your Char Siu Bao will be ready. So whilst the Char Siu Bao are baking away, set my little snack picnic up. Nice chunks of dark chocolate ready for my walk. A few biscuits in there. All I've got is my Char Siu Bao and I'm ready to go. So the Char Siu Bao had 15 minutes and look at that. They look beautiful. Nice shape for a little stroll. Ideally you let those cool a little bit, but I'm quite hungry, so I'm gonna take those out, go for my walk and dig in a couple of those. Char Siu Bao, packed and ready to go. My chocolate and my seaweed biscuits also ready. Let's get going. Been looking forward to this for hours. It's always good to take a break and get your energy levels up. And this Char Siu Bao, the bread is delicious. And what I like is that it's actually a savoury snack. A lot of the sort of shop-bought snacks that you get are often quite sweet. And when you're on a walk, I miss that savoury. I've got a savoury palate myself. Let's try those seaweed biscuits. Oh, look how crunchy they look. The seaweed really brings out the savoury as well. But of course, it's just nice to finish off with something a little bit sweet. So my homemade fruit and nut. So all these homemade snacks give you a boost of energy whilst you're doing your exercise at the same time. And it's just a lot of fun to be able to make this, get the whole family involved. That's the way to live a healthier, longer, better life.